This tutorial is going to introduce the basic usage of the Sprinkler Estimator utility included in the Viking Tools for Revit add-in. This is very much an estimation utility and is not really a layout utility at all, so it'll give you a rough idea of the quantity of sprinklers needed, but it's unable to take into account certain things such as lighting or ducts or anything like that. So it's really a basic layout, basic estimate of sprinkler quantity. In addition to that, we'll also briefly cover how you can utilize some of the coverage indication capabilities included in the upright and pendant sprinkler families distributed by Viking. So to access the Sprinkler Estimator, you can navigate to the Viking tab on the ribbon, then go to the Utilities section, the Sprinkler dropdown, and the Sprinkler Estimator. We'll also show you some of the common errors you can encounter while trying to use this. So the first one you'll probably encounter is that we're unable to find a valid sprinkler family. Please load one and retry. If I actually go to my model here and look, I do have some sprinklers. They're all the default Revit sprinklers that come with the mechanical template. But the issue here is that they're all hosted variants. So when we're using Estimator, we're not necessarily tying the sprinklers to a ceiling or a wall or anything, so we need them to not be the hosted variants. None of the sprinklers distributed by Viking are hosted, so to fix this, you just have to load a sprinkler in. Here we can see a couple ways that you can do it right out of the Viking ribbon. Go to the sprinkler or dry sprinkler drop-down, choose your category. I'll just use a standard response. And then I'll search for the VK 1021, 155 degree, in brass. And I'll just pick this one. Let it load into the model. We'll see it pop up down here. And then it queues it for placement, but I'll just escape out of that. Another option is to use the Sprinkler Selector utility. So I've already brought that up. I picked a extended coverage sprinkler, a VK600 at 155 degree Fahrenheit with a standard brass finish, and I'll just click the Load Family button. And again, that queues it for placement. I'll just escape out of it. So another error you might encounter is if you're clicked into the project browser and try to enter the estimator, it's going to tell you, hey, you're in a view that we don't really support. You have to go into it or switch into it. So I do have a ceiling plan active in the background here, but maybe I was also in something like a 3D view or a section view. I'd have to activate that view and then actually click into it so that it's essentially my active view, and I can then go ahead and prompt Revit for me to pick things in this view. So now, when I try to launch into the estimator, it lets me get into it. First thing you'll notice is that there's two options on the left here, two tabs for different types of layout. We have a area of coverage based one, where you specify square footage of coverage, a maximum spacing, and the height you'd like your deflector at. And then finally you're choosing which of the valid families in your project you would like to place. So here I have my VK 1021 and my VK 600. The second tab is essentially the same thing, but instead of an area of coverage, you specify a coverage length and width. So this is really for like an extended coverage type sprinkler, so my VK600. When we had the Sprinkler Estimator utility up, or the Sprinkler Selector utility up, it gave us an idea of max and min coverage, but we could also get the data sheet right out of that. So I'll just show that real quick. If I wanted a good idea, I can see my max spacing right here. Alternatively, I could just click the datasheet link and see what valid spacings there are and kind of have it in my head going into the utility. So back to the utility, we have a few layout options available to you. The first three are manual. So select a rectangle, you just click one corner and then drag a rectangle out, and we'll lay sprinklers out within that. Pick corners, so you pick two corners of a rectangle, and we'll again lay sprinklers out within that. An angled layout, you're still picking a rectangle, but you pick a third point, so if it's at an angle, we can handle that. And then the final two options are auto layout spaces or rooms. Neither of these is particularly granular, and it will just, for every space in the entire project or every room, it will use the same options, but we are looking into making that a little more granular for more complex projects. And since I have none defined in the project, if I were to just try to go into it, it'll tell me that no spaces are present, so obviously we can't use that. Two checkboxes here, continue placement, so basically once I lay out one set of sprinklers, do I want this window to pop back up and keep placing stuff, or am I only doing one thing? Show preview is just whether you'd like to see a little preview of what we're attempting to do. We'll show that in just a moment, but essentially it gives you the ability to modify these parameters and see what it would look like, or also accept or decline, so choose not to place the sprinklers after seeing what it might look like. So the first option is the select rectangle. I'll just show it on a basic room here. All you have to do is click somewhere, so I'm kind of in the top left corner of this room, then drag my rectangle out. I could go in, kind of any direction. Let go, and it will place the sprinklers in. As you can see, it doesn't really take into account things like light fixtures or centering yourself in ceiling tiles, because again, this is really an estimation utility. It doesn't have the smarts to be a true layout utility at this time. If I wanted to see what this looks like with a 225 area of coverage, I can just change that. And I say I need 6 sprinklers now. I could just redraw it and see I would need 4 in the alternative scenario. And I'll accept that. Second option is the pick corner layout option. So you're picking 2 corners here, essentially the same thing, a rectangle. I'll grab one corner, and then I'll grab another corner down here. And maybe it was a little too far down. I'm covering within the wall, but I still need 4 sprinklers, so it's pretty decent. So again, you're just picking corners of a rectangle in that scenario. Third scenario is picking an angled layout. So this is basically if you have a room on an angle, or just a certain section of the project on an angle that for some reason you'd like to cover kind of natively on an angle. So here you can pick maybe one corner, pick the second corner, and then here you finally pick a third corner. So I pick down here a third corner, or up here the third corner of the rectangle to close it off. And when I do that, I see that it lays out the sprinklers kind of at an angle, so that at least the coverage indication here is also pretty clear about what I consider these sprinklers to be covering, and I'll accept that. The fixed coverage option, and I'll just do a larger area to demonstrate this. I'll lay out this large area over here. Pick one corner, pick a second corner. So at the max area of coverage option, we can see that the coverage indicators abut directly against the walls here, or the sides of the rectangle that I chose. If I were to utilize the fixed coverage option, and I'll just switch this to the VK600, we'll see that little overlaps will actually start to show up, because really the only difference here is that we're showing the full coverage area instead of the smaller area of coverage, or actual area of coverage. So this will give you an idea of how much you're overcovering with larger areas of coverage. So 16 by 16, then up to 18 by 18, and we can see the number of sprinklers I need drop down here a little bit, and then up to the max 20 by 20 that the sprinkler can handle. And I would still need 30 sprinklers, but you can get a good idea of how much it's overcovering. And again, these are just all equally spaced, so it's not really maximizing the full throw. So it's just basic estimation, and I'll accept these. So if I look at the summary option, I can see that all 4 of those sets of sprinklers are on level 1. They're all just mainly picked spaces, so I don't know exactly where they were. This is the number of sprinklers, the max area of coverage for them, the actual area of coverage. So you'll note the fixed coverage one is just actually covering 400, as well as having the max of 400, and then the idealized and unrealistic branch and sprinkler spacing on the branch. So I'll just get rid of that, undo a couple of sprinkler placements here, The other options we have are to auto layout rooms or spaces. So this is really just a bulk layout. So just to demonstrate, I'll just come along and tag a few spaces here. And then I'll show you a little shortcoming of this. So you'd come through your model, grab all the more or less rectangular spaces, and I'm just going to pick this many just to give you an idea with the summary, how this can end up looking. So bear with me while I pick these all. The height here, if you're familiar with our Clean Agent Assistant, the height offset and having an accurately defined one is a pretty big deal, but for this scenario, it's not as big of a concern. We utilize a kind of different logic surrounding these, so you can just leave the defaults as I'm doing right here. Alright, that'll be the last space that we want to use. So here, with all these implemented, and again I could come and name them whatever I want, so classroom or office or what have you. Now I go back to the Viking tab, Sprinkler Estimator, and then I can use the Auto Layout Spaces option. And this does it on all levels of the project, so it's every space in the project. But here you get a basic idea of what this is going to look like. So I can see for all those spaces I would need 154 sprinklers with a 100 square foot coverage. Or if I go to 225 square feet, I can take an entire 50 sprinklers off that estimate. So pretty decent. If I accept this and then go to the Show Summary option, I can now see that they're all level 1 in this case. There was 28 spaces, and these would all have the names and numbers utilized in the actual project, and then how many were actually used, and then again the coverage details. And if you want this, you can just Control A, Control C, and go bring it out to Excel or something. Once you exit the estimator, that data is basically gone, so if you want it, you should definitely grab it from here. Just to demonstrate some of the shortcomings of it, and I'll just get rid of those sprinklers real quick, and I'll use a room to do this. So if we look at this, it's really a non-standard shape. So anything not rectangular is going to cause some issues for us. And this kind of depends on the model as well. So here we see that it actually extends out into these two. They're actually bathrooms because there's no wall or door or anything here separating them. They're just open areas. So I'll go back to the Viking tab, Sprinkler Estimator, and then I will just auto layout rooms with this. And here we can immediately get an idea of how not great a job it did. Here's one of the corridors we were trying to protect. Not possible to really easily do that. So we did an okay job in some places, but there's a lot of spaces we're not covering. So this is really not a conservative estimate. It will only place a sprinkler if it can within essentially what it considers the space. So we'll probably make some improvements for it later, but it's pretty difficult to have an optimal spacing and layout. So to realize that laying out down the center line of this corridor here and extracting that from the geometry is pretty difficult. So just as a final option, final thing, I'll just draw a rough rectangle over here. Not quite accurate, accept it. If you want to play with the sprinkler coverage on your own, there are a couple parameters that we use, a AOC X and AOC Y, so an X spacing and a Y spacing, and sometimes these get rotated when we place them in based off of the branch spacing, but you can just mess with these values and change it to, say, a 12 foot by 16 feet, just as an illustration, and just see what that coverage actually looks like. So if you're just manually placing these, you could get an idea. And then you can control that on a per sprinkler basis, and you can control the ability to show it or not show it on a per sprinkler basis. But if you want to do that in bulk, so you just use the space layout and you don't want these taking up all the space in your project, go to the Viking tab, Sprinkler, Hide Sprinkler Coverage, or alternatively show sprinkler coverage. So that's the easy way to toggle them all within the model. And that concludes our tutorial on how to utilize the Sprinkler Estimator utility in the Viking Tools for Revit add-in.